So let's jump straight into our first big question, pulled directly from our source material. It's a bold statement, this one, and one that really makes you think there never was a good war or a bad peace. And then we'll tackle our second profound idea, which is, I think, equally thought-provoking. He who will not economize will have to agonize. We'll explore each of these statements one by one, making sure every idea is crystal clear and really sticks with you, using simple language, sort of 10th grade level, so it all makes sense. All right, let's start by digging into that first declaration. There never was a good war or a bad peace. It seems, looking back through history, that people always find a way to justify conflict, don't they? They'll always try to justify war. They'll say, oh, it is for a just cause. But as our source asks, is it really the only way forward?
It's a question humanity has wrestled with for, well, millennia. If we trace the origins of war, they go way, way back to ancient times. Initially, conflicts were often on a much smaller scale, sometimes even for something as fundamental as protecting cattle. There's a concept known as gavishti in ancient India. But as societies grew more complex, so did the justifications. By medieval times, for instance, you saw wars fought explicitly in the name of religion, things like jihad during the Delhi Sultanate, the Mughal Empire, or the Egyptian Empire.
So even as the reasons for war shifted over time, what's consistent, as our source highlights, is this persistent human drive to, well, justify conflict, often by framing them as good wars. How do we even begin to define that term?
That's the crux of it, really. Our source defines a good war as one where the end goal or maybe the underlying motive might seem legitimate. But the fundamental tension, what's truly fascinating here, is that war and peace are, well, they're antithetical. Where there is one, the other cannot truly exist. They're fundamentally opposed forces.
Right. And then there's the flip side, bad peace. How does the essay define that concept? What does it mean?
A bad peace is framed as sort of a period of calm that might lead to negative consequences, could be tangible or intangible things. A clear example, perhaps, would be holding on to peace even when facing brutal oppression. While it might prevent immediate fighting, it could have significant psychological and societal costs, for the people living under it.
So after exploring these definitions, the essay makes this really powerful central claim. On close observation and analysis, one realizes there never truly was a good war or a bad peace. Let's unpack the arguments for why that might hold true.
There are several quite compelling reasons laid out. Firstly, from an ethical standpoint, the idea that the means do not justify the ends. So no matter how noble or just an end goal might seem, if the path to achieve it involves widespread destruction and suffering, well, it remains ethically flawed.
That ethical perspective is powerful. But, many would argue that in extreme situations, like during World War II, the goal of confronting regimes like Hitler's felt undeniably good. How does the essay square that perceived noble aim with the horrific means used?
It's a crucial point. The essay argues that a second devastating truth is that the very idea of a winner in war is, well, it's a cruel illusion. When you actually tally the human cost, the sheer number of people who died in the two global wars is just a stark reminder. It becomes pretty clear. Humanity itself is the ultimate loser, regardless of who claims victory on the battlefield.
And think about this too. War isn't just like hitting pause on progress. It actively erodes centuries of hard-won human advancement, culturally, technologically, socially. Look at the recent Ukraine-Russia war, for example. It severely disrupted decades of peace and global cooperation that the world had sort of maintained after World War II. It's like hitting rewind on collective human progress.
What's also critical here, and the essay really emphasizes this, is the wide-ranging and complex negative impact that war has. This really prevents it from ever being considered good. At the psychological level, it causes terrible anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder for countless individuals. Socially, war leads to huge issues like displacement, the loss of community, loss of brotherhood, and massive refugee crises. Think about the refugee issues during the conflict between East Pakistan and West Pakistan that directly led to the Indo-Pak War.
And economically, the impact is just devastating. Wars cause loss of livelihood, they lead to poverty, and they widen inequality. Just look at countries in Africa such as Niger, Chad, and Cameroon, which are unfortunately quite war-prone. These are regions where poverty and hunger are rampant, and they tragically remain highly underdeveloped. Yeah, thinking about these profound impacts, can you recall an example from history or maybe current events where a war's negative consequences seem to just completely outweigh any potential good intentions? It really makes you pause, doesn't it?
And similarly, the idea of a bad peace, well, that too often remains a myth, according to the essay. One of the primary reasons is that peace is really the only lasting and sustainable solution for humanity. It's the foundation.
We've seen powerful examples of this throughout history, haven't we? India's freedom struggle, led by Mahatma Gandhi, that was a fundamentally nonviolent path to independence. Also, Nelson Mandela's peaceful struggle in South Africa, and even Martin Luther King Jr., who was inspired by Gandhiji, fought peacefully for the rights of blacks in America. These weren't bad pieces. They were profoundly good, transformative moments.
Exactly. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, peace undeniably leads to development in all spheres and walks of life. It enables progress. So how is it that peace could ever be categorized as bad after hearing this? I mean, look at Japan post WWII. After amending its constitution to prohibit Japan's participation in any war, it led to this renewed focus on development and peace. And look at them now. Japan became one of the most developed and successful countries in the world.
That's such a powerful example. It really underscores the constructive power of peace. But this does raise a critical question, doesn't it? The essay asks this too. However, a question that arises is whether good war and bad peace can never occur, or has never happened. Is it always that absolute?
That's a crucial nuance. The essay acknowledges that such occurrences are indeed rare and few. But it concedes that, from one perspective, there have been instances argued as good war and bad peace. And the reason why is that the terms good and bad are highly subjective. They depend heavily on viewpoint. Therefore, strict absolute classification becomes extremely difficult.
Right, so the source gives an example of a good war argument. The global war on terrorism led by the United States after the 9/11 attacks. It notes that many argue that a global war is indeed necessary to effectively curtail and eradicate terrorism. It's one perspective, seeing it as a necessary evil, maybe.
And conversely, for an example of bad peace, the essay points to the peace agreement between the USA and the Taliban that happened just a year or so back. It explains its consequences. It led to the downfall of the democratically elected Afghanistan government and the rise of the authoritarian Taliban regime. Here, as one can clearly see, the peace was arguably bad for many Afghans. Even today, the oppression by the Taliban continues.
So what one may realize from this, I suppose, is that sometimes things are not black and white, especially in, well, their gray world. It's complicated.
That being said, and this is really important, it's also imperative to understand that war should remain an exception. Peace should always be the priority. That's the core message, despite the gray areas.
Okay, so given all that, what does this mean for the way forward? How do we prioritize peace? Well, at the national level, the essay suggests countries need to learn from Japan and perhaps strive towards a no-war policy. It also mentions India's policy of no first attack as a positive sign, a step in the right direction.
And then at the global level, there need to be strong institutional measures to prevent war, whatever the cause might be. This means strengthening global cooperation through transparent and open participation in organizations like the United Nations, collective security, shared responsibility.
And as we wrap up this section, it's powerful to recall the words of Wilfred Owen, the poet, who in his poem Dulce et Decorum Est just brilliantly exposed the myth of a just war.
Yes, he wrote those haunting lines. My friend, you will not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory the old lie, dulce et decorum est pro patria mores. Meaning, of course, it is sweet and fitting to die for one's country. Owen shows the horrific reality behind that old lie.
Okay, powerful stuff. Let's shift gears now and dive into our second profound statement for today. He who will not economize will have to agonize. This statement really hits home when you think about certain examples, like the one the essay uses comparing India and Pakistan. Both achieved freedom around the same time, 1947.
That's right. But they chose very different paths afterward. India chose a very carefully planned approach, emphasizing, what we're calling economization. The same wasn't really the case with Pakistan. And the result today is pretty evident. India is one of the fastest growing economies, while Pakistan still struggles with poverty, growth, and recurrent economic crises.
It really highlights the importance of this idea. So before we go deeper, how does our source guide us in understanding what economize truly means? Is it just about saving money?
Well, in the narrow sense, yes, the term is generally financial. It means practicing thrift, reducing wasteful expenditure, and having a planned approach to your finances.
But the essay broadens that definition quite a bit, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In a broad sense, the term can be extended to many, many fields. It's not just about cash. Think about recycling waste, the whole circular economy model, like Japan did during the Tokyo Olympics 2020, creating metals from valuable metals recovered from e-waste. That's economizing resources. Or in the energy sector, saving energy, practicing things like Earth Hour, and of course saving natural resources such as water. All of that falls under this broader umbrella of economizing.
And it even applies to how governments operate, doesn't it? The concept of minimum government, maximum governance can be seen as resembling economization, doing more with less, being efficient. It makes you think, where have you personally seen economization happen in a way you might not have considered before, beyond just, tightening the belt financially?
There are really two critical reasons why we need to economize. Firstly, it's the fundamental economic reality. Resources are limited, but our wants are, well, seemingly unlimited.
Yeah, and that's not just abstract theory. The essay uses India's example. India has only about 2.4% of the world's land, but has to support something like 17% of the global population. That's a huge pressure on limited resources.
Exactly. And the second primary reason is that economization is extremely important to achieve sustainable and long-lasting growth.
And sustainable here, as the source defines it, means fulfilling the needs of today without compromising the needs of tomorrow, right?
Precisely. And connecting this globally, if the world genuinely wants to achieve the Paris Conference target, limiting temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius, it has to economize, both financially in terms of investment and with respect to energy and natural resources. There's simply no other path to sustainability.
So the essay strongly affirms the core statement. It is indeed true that he who will not economize will have to agonize. Let's look at how this agony plays out across different scales.
Okay, starting at the individual level. Someone who doesn't practice economization will, the essay argues, inevitably face manifold economic and social issues. This can lead to poverty and a reduced standard of living.
It sounds like a vicious cycle, doesn't it? Wasteful spending and a lack of planning often lead people into this trap of poverty and debt, making it incredibly hard to break free.
Moving up a level to a family or even an organization, non-economization here can lead to severe distress, maybe loss of employment, even bankruptcy. And for a family, that agony doesn't just stay with one generation. It can easily pass down to the next.
The essay uses the specific example of Vijay Mallya and Kingfisher Airlines. It describes this unsustainable debt, over 500 crores, leading eventually to bankruptcy. And that caused agony not just for the employees who lost their jobs, but also for the lenders, the banks. The ripple effect is just massive.
Then, at the societal level, a lack of economization has broader consequences. It contributes to perpetuating inequality and causes widespread issues such as hunger.
Yeah, reports like the Global Hunger Index and the World Inequality Report, they paint a pretty grim picture of these societal agonies, don't they?
Taking it up to the national level, countries that fail to economize face, well, manifold problems.
India itself experienced this. Before the 1991 economic reforms, India faced a severe balance of payment crisis, struggling to pay its debts, largely due to a lack of sufficient economization in its policies.
And a very contemporary example is Sri Lanka today. It's witnessing a severe economic crisis, and the essay links it directly to the same reason. Sri Lanka's populist measures, it argues, completely discarded the need to economize, and that has led to severe distress for the entire nation.
Finally, we reach the international, the global level.
Yes, and here the world suffers agony in the form of huge issues like climate change, the loss of biodiversity, reduction in vital resources, which in turn can increase the threat of conflict and war over those scarce resources.
The IPCC's sixth assessment report is mentioned, talking about irreversible changes that have already taken place due to, essentially, our collective failure to economize our planetary resources. Thinking about all these different levels, individual, family, society, nation, global, where do you see the most urgent need for economization in the world right now? And why? It really forces you to consider our priorities, doesn't it? Okay, so it's pretty evident by now that the way forward, according to this essay, is to economize. Let's look at some practical steps proposed.
Right. First, the essay suggests economization has to become sort of an institutional quality. It emphasizes the basic process of budgeting. Whether it's personal finance or national policy, preparing and actually sticking to a budget leads to much better control over expenditure and resource usage.
Secondly, there's a focus on education. The need to economize should be clearly conveyed to children right from their younger days, teaching the importance of practicing thrift in school, making it a core value early on. Because those fundamental lessons, they really stick, don't they?
They do. And thirdly, recognizing and encouraging good efforts. When people or organizations make real efforts towards economization, maybe they should be recognized with awards or some other economic benefits. Positive reinforcement, that can truly bring about positive change in behavior.
It seems like it's about finding a balance, too. The essay mentions people needing to walk a middle path between spending and saving, between using resources and conserving them.
Exactly. It's not about extreme austerity, necessarily, but responsible management. And to conclude this section, the essay brings in the wisdom of Mahatma Gandhi. Lastly, his words can act as a guide for all of us on this path. He famously said, "There is enough in the world for everybody's needs, but not for their greeds."
That really cuts to the heart of it. So in this light, one can learn and practice the quality of economization to have, hopefully, a more peaceful, happy, and agony-free life.
All right, that was a lot to unpack. Let's quickly pull out those core ideas again just to reinforce them for your long-term memory. Active recall time. Okay, so for the first topic, there never was a good war or a bad peace. The key takeaways were the strong arguments for why these concepts are often myths. We looked at the ethical concerns, means versus ends, the devastating human cost, how war undoes progress, and those manifold negative impacts, psychological, social, economic. Then, the powerful example showing peace is the real solution for development in humanism, Gandhi, Mandela, post-war Japan, but also that crucial nuance. While rare exceptions or subjective viewpoints might exist, like the arguments around the 9/11 war on terror or the USA-Taliban peace deal, the fundamental principle holds. War must be the exception, peace the priority.
Got it. And for the second topic, he who will not economize will have to agonize. We learned that economize is much broader than just money. It includes resources, energy, even governance, like Japan's e-waste metals. The two core reasons why we need to economize: one, limited resources versus unlimited wants, and two, the absolute necessity for sustainable growth, protecting the future. Then we saw that cascade of agony from not economizing, hitting individuals with debt, families with bankruptcy, societies with inequality, nations with economic crises like Sri Lanka, and the whole globe with climate change. And finally, those practical steps forward: institutional budgeting, teaching thrift early, recognizing good efforts, and finding that balanced middle path guided by Gandhi's wisdom about need versus greed.
And drawing the connection between the two. It's compelling, isn't it? How these two essays, though seemingly on different subjects, both point towards pathways for a more stable, developed, and ultimately peaceful future for humanity. They do this by challenging our conventional thinking, prompting us to rethink war and peace, and urging responsible actions regarding our resources at every single level.
Wow. Yeah, that was quite the deep dive. Thank you so much for joining us today and for exploring these truly thought-provoking ideas with us. It's been an incredible journey through some very powerful insights from this essay.
And maybe a final thought to leave you with, building on that idea of perspective. If our understanding of good and bad can shift based on viewpoint, especially concerning war, peace, and resources, how does that challenge us right now to critically examine our current choices? Not just in conflict, but in how we manage our collective resources for the generations that come after us. That's something worth pondering long after this discussion ends, isn't it?
Absolutely. A really crucial question for all of us. Keep pondering these big questions and please share your own insights if you feel inclined. We always appreciate hearing your thoughts. Until next time, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.